Mitchell. I'm a cop.
Cool. And I'm Melly Mitchell.
Truth-telling game. Go. I can't do a push-up. Go. I'm your friend. Make up stories. Then we can go to the same college. Cool.
You're always thinking about the past. You work at...
Why don't you play?
Morning. What would you like for breakfast?
Very unattractive. Boys will get.
Oh, that's a good choice.
Okay.
There's a private beach on the nature.
Yeah?
The beach looks like paradise. Crystal water, white sand, black volcanic rock framing the cove like nature built a stage. If you saw a photo, you'd be booking a flight before the person showing you even finished talking. Night Shyamalan knows this. That's why he opens Old the way he does, by making you want to be there. He lets the beauty do its job first. And then, piece by piece, he takes it apart. Old dropped in July 2021, and it's one of those films that doesn't just scare you, it unsettles you. There's a difference. Scared is a reaction you get over. Unsettled is something you carry home. The movie is based on the graphic novel Sandcastle by Pierre Oscar Levy and Frederick Peters, and Shyamalan takes its central premise, a beach that makes you age at a terrifying speed, and builds something genuinely haunting around it. A thriller about time, about bodies that betray you, about what it means to watch your life compress into a single afternoon. This part hits different when you realize it's not really a monster movie. The monster is the clock. Let's get into it. We meet the Kappa family on their way to a tropical resort, and they look like any other family on vacation, except for the tension sitting quietly in the car with them. Guy Kappa, played by Gael García Bernal, is an actuary. His job is literally calculating risk, measuring the weight of the future. You file that away because this movie is going to come back to it. His wife, Priska, Vicky Krieps, who is quietly extraordinary in this role, is a museum curator, someone whose world is built around preserving things, around stopping time. Their kids are Maddox, age 11, and Trent, age 6. Both kids are at that stage where everything is still wondrous and slightly enormous. The marriage, though, you notice it before anyone says a word about it. The way Guy and Priska are polite to each other in that specific way that married people sometimes get when they've been having a very long conversation that hasn't finished yet. They love their kids fiercely. They're good parents. But the two of them, there's something that's been decided, or is being decided, and this trip has the feeling of a last chapter, not an ending exactly, but a conclusion. The kids don't know yet. Whatever is happening between their parents has been sealed away behind their smiles for the duration of this vacation. Priska is also carrying something else, something physical. The film doesn't announce it yet, but she knows, and there's a quietness to her that goes beyond sadness. The resort is absurdly beautiful, manicured everything, flowers that shouldn't look that perfect, a staff so attentive you almost feel watched, and the manager, played by Gustav Hammersten, greets the guests with a warmth that is technically flawless and somehow completely wrong. He's charming the way that very expensive things are charming, designed to please, designed to distract. He makes eye contact. He asks about the children. He smiles that smile. He watches. You catch it in small moments. The way his eyes track guests as they move through the lobby. The way he files information away. He's cataloging people, though for what purpose isn't clear yet. Not yet. Young Trent wanders while the adults get settled, and he finds a boy his age named Idlib. They strike up one of those immediate kid friendships built entirely on the shared joy of language. The two of them exchange big words back and forth like a game. Trent is earnest and unguarded, the kind of 6-year-old who talks to strangers because it genuinely hasn't occurred to him not to. Idlib's uncle works at the resort. This detail lands lightly, gets filed away. It won't feel significant until it saves everyone's life. Other guests are worth noticing. Dr. Charles Rufus Sewell moves through the resort with the kind of confidence that belongs to men who are used to being the authority in every room. He's a cardiac surgeon, successful, the posture of someone who has made a career out of certainty. His wife, Crystal, Abby Lee, is strikingly beautiful and knows it, wearing it like armor. His elderly mother, Agnes, shuffles alongside them, small and a little unsteady. His daughter, Kara, is quiet. Then there's Jaren Kenlung and Patricia Nikki Amuka. Bird, he's a nurse, she's a therapist. Two people who've built their lives around caring for others, which makes a particular kind of terrible sense in what's coming. The resort manager approaches Guy with something in his manner. A special recommendation. There's a beach, he says. Private. Secluded. Not something offered to everyone, only the right guests. He hands over directions with a warmth that reads as a gift. It is not a gift. The minivan ride to the beach cuts through jungle dense enough that the sunlight disappears in patches. Several families are in it together. The Kappas, Charles's group, Jaren and Patricia. Everyone is doing the polite stranger thing. Introductions, small talk, the careful friendliness of people who didn't choose each other and don't quite know what to do about that yet. Old. The kids are restless. The adults are pleasant. Nobody knows. The path opens up and the beach hits you exactly the way Shyamalan intends it to. A cove cut into towering black rock, the ocean an impossible blue, sand so pale it looks almost white. It's the kind of place that doesn't feel real. The families spread out, drop their things, let the tension of the minivan ride dissolve, and then they notice the man. He's sitting alone near the water, not far away. Big frame, sunglasses. He looks up at the group like he wasn't expecting them, like their arrival is an interruption. This is mid-sized sedan. Yes, that's his name, and yes, he's apparently a rapper of some renown, played by Aaron Pierre. He was here before any of them arrived. He offers no explanation for that. He doesn't warm up easily. There's something coiled about him, something that reads as both wariness and guilt. Patricia, the therapist, clocks him instantly. There's also the matter of the nosebleed. Mid-sized sedan wipes at it once, dismissive, and says nothing. And then comes the first impossible thing. There's a woman in the water, or rather, there was. She's found face down in the shallows, very still, in a way that all movement in her body has simply stopped. Charles steps forward because that is what Charles does, and his examination is professional and efficient and ends with a face that doesn't give anything away but says everything. She's been dead for a while, except she wasn't dead when they arrived. The beach goes quiet in a way that has nothing to do with sound. Someone notices Maddox first. She was 11 this morning. She was definitely 11 at breakfast. Her parents both saw her, both talked to her, both exist in a reality where Maddox is an 11-year-old girl on a family trip. But the girl standing near the water right now is not 11. She's 16 maybe. The face is the same face but rearranged into something older. The posture has shifted. The swimsuit is fitting differently. Trent's shorts are tight on him in a way they weren't an hour ago. The adults look at the children. Then they look at each other. Charles's mother, Agnes, isn't doing well. She says it's the heat, says she just needs to sit down. She's been managing fine. She's old, but she's been managing. She sits. She says something about not feeling right. And then she stops saying anything at all. Agnes doesn't get up. Two things are happening at once, both of them impossible, and the families are standing on white sand in the middle of paradise trying to make their brains process either of them. A woman is dead who was alive very recently, and the children are growing, not a little, not in the way kids grow where you notice in retrospect. right now, in real time. No one has cell service. The path through the jungle is right there. Up the hill, back through the trees, back to the minivan, back to a world where things follow normal rules. One of the adults heads for it, walks quickly, then faster, pushing up through the undergrowth toward the path they came in on. They don't make it. A wave of dizziness, not a stumble, not a trip, but a full body shutdown, and they're back on the sand, where they started. They try again. Same result. The ocean rolls in and rolls out. The black rock stands silent on every side. The beach doesn't let you leave. Nobody says it out loud. Not yet. The adults are doing what adults do when something is wrong but too wrong to name. They're moving around the edges of it, pointing at smaller things, asking answerable questions. Is she okay? What happened to Agnes? Did anyone else try the path? Keeping themselves busy with the manageable pieces because the big piece, the actual thing that is happening, is too large to hold all at once. But the children are right there, growing, aging. Every glance across the beach confirms it again. Guy is an actuary. Risk assessment is the architecture of his brain. He watches Maddox, he watches Trent, and you can see him calculating, not as a father first, but as someone whose mind automatically reaches for numbers when the world stops making sense. Maddox was 11 at breakfast. She's 16 now, maybe 5 years in a few hours. He's counting minutes in his head, testing the rate, running the math over and over until it settles into something he doesn't want it to settle into. 30 minutes, roughly, equals 1 year. That's the conclusion the group eventually lands on, and landing on it does not help. The beach gets quieter, not because anyone stops moving, but because that number puts a ceiling on things. If 30 minutes is a year, then in this cove, with this sun, a full day is nearly half a century. You sit with that long enough and it rearranges your understanding of where you are. This isn't just a strange afternoon. This is potentially the last place any of them will ever be. Maddox is 16 and doesn't entirely know what to do with herself. Thomason Mackenzie takes over the role from young Alexa Swinton, and the transition is handled with a strange seamlessness. Same eyes, same quiet watchfulness, just stretched across a face that wasn't there this morning. Maddox isn't screaming. That's the thing that gets you about her. She's scared, clearly, but she processes fear inward. She watches her parents the way kids watch parents when the adults are frightened, looking for a gap, looking for the signal that says it's okay to be as scared as I feel. Trent is 11 now, played by Luca Rodriguez, and his reaction is almost the opposite. He's too young to fully grasp the mortality part, but old enough to know something is completely wrong, and his way of handling it is to stay close and stay verbal. He keeps talking, keeps asking questions. It's not annoying, it's heartbreaking, because you understand that talking is how he's holding himself together. The escape attempts by this point have been tried by everyone. Not just one person, multiple adults, different directions, different approaches. Some try the path alone, some try in pairs. The coral rocks that frame the cove look scalable in theory, and one of them gets partway up before the blackouts start. That's what happens when you push toward the exit. Your body simply stops, like a switch. You drop to your knees, or fold forward, or sit down hard, and then you come back to awareness on the sand with no clear memory of how you got there. No pain, no transition, just gone, then back. And back means here, on the beach where you started. The ocean is technically an option. Open water, no rocks in the way, nothing stopping you from swimming out past the cove and around to civilization. Jaren floats this idea. He's the nurse, and his thinking is clear and methodical. But the blackouts don't care what direction you're moving. The moment you get far enough, you come back. The beach is not a prison with visible walls. The walls are inside you. Mid-sized Sedan has been watching all of this from a distance. He's been here longer than any of them. That much is clear. He arrived before the families did, came on his own, and nobody at the resort apparently thought this was worth mentioning. He's guarded in a way that reads as defensive, not aggressive, but closed off. Like someone who has already processed the first shock of this place and moved past it into something grimmer. His real name isn't Mid-Size Sedan, obviously. That's a stage name, or something between a joke and a persona. The rapper thing sits oddly in this context, which is probably the point. The ordinary details of who these people are outside this cove become almost absurd here. The career, the title, the carefully cultivated image. None of it applies on a beach that eats time. The nosebleeds are getting worse. He's been wiping at his nose on and off since the others arrived, brushing it off when anyone notices. But blood is harder to dismiss when it keeps coming back, and by now it's frequent enough that people are paying attention. the medical people especially. Charles, who notices everything clinical almost involuntarily, and Jaren, who has the bedside instinct that makes you look twice at anyone who seems unwell. What's wrong with him isn't clear yet, but his body is doing things that bodies shouldn't do at this rate, and he's been here longer, which means he's been aging longer, and the math on that is not great. Brendan shows up in this stretch of the story, and Brendan has hemophilia. Hemophilia, if you don't know, is a clotting disorder. The blood doesn't stop. A small cut that a normal person wouldn't think twice about can become something serious, and on a beach with no medical equipment, no bandages beyond what people packed, no hospital within any reachable distance. Hemophilia is a terrible thing to be carrying into this situation. He cuts himself. It's not dramatic the way it sounds. It's a small thing, accidental, the kind of minor injury that happens all the time at a beach, but the blood doesn't stop. And on this beach, with time accelerating, with everyone's bodies running through decades and hours, a wound that won't close becomes something terrifying very quickly. The group has a cardiac surgeon. That feels like it should help. Charles has the knowledge and the instincts, and when he sees Brendan, he assesses the situation with professional composure. There's something else happening with Charles that's been building since they arrived, something that the others haven't fully named yet because it's been subtle. Small moments of confusion, fractured attention, and irritability that spikes and then smooths over like he doesn't register it. Charles takes medication, has for years. The medication manages something, and without getting into what the movie eventually confirms, the point is that whatever keeps Charles stable requires regular doses, and regular doses require a bag that's sitting somewhere on the beach, and the medication inside that bag was packed for a long weekend, not for decades of accelerated time running through a body that doesn't know it's being cheated. The stability Charles has is borrowed, and the loan is coming due faster than anyone realizes. He goes for Brendan with a knife, not out of nowhere. Exactly. There's a build-up, a sequence of increasingly fractured responses to the situation that escalate quickly once the group's panic starts feeding off itself. But the moment the knife comes out, it still lands like a jolt, because Charles up to this point has been the authority figure. The surgeon, the one who knows things, the one the others have reflexively deferred to because he projects certainty. Watching that certainty dissolve into something jagged and unpredictable is the first time the film shows you clearly that nobody on this beach is going to be who they were when they arrived. He cuts Brendan. The wound is real and it bleeds badly, and the people around them pull Charles back, manage the situation in the immediate sense, stop the knife from doing more damage, and then something strange happens. The wound closes. Not immediately, not like magic, not like a special effect, but over the next stretch of time, in real-time view, the cut heals. The blood slows and stops. The skin knits back together. Because 30 minutes is a year, and a year is enough for the body's own slow machinery of repair to run its full course. Brendan's hemophilia means his blood doesn't clot, but time on this beach doesn't care about his hemophilia. It just runs every biological process faster, including the ones that were always quietly working to put him back together. For now. For now, he's okay. Charles stands with the knife still in his hand and something wrong behind his eyes. The group watches him. He seems to return to himself, seems almost confused about what just happened, sets the knife down with the careful movements of a man trying to show he's fine. Nobody believes him. The sun is still high. The water is still gorgeous. Brent sits near the water and watches it roll in, and somewhere behind his eyes you can see him processing the fact that he went to sleep last night as a 6-year-old and is now 5 years older, and the math on this day doesn't have a version where everyone goes home. Priska doubles over. Not dramatically, no gasp, no sudden collapse that the camera lingers on. She just folds, one hand going to her abdomen, her face going to a place that's past wincing and into something deeper. Guy is next to her immediately. She waves him off the way people wave off help when they're trying to convince themselves they don't need it yet. She needs it. The ovarian tumor. The thing she's been carrying quietly this whole time. The thing the film slipped in without announcement back at the resort has been growing. On a beach where 30 minutes becomes a year, a tumor doesn't wait. It doesn't develop on the slow timeline that medicine is built around, the one where doctors have months to plan and patients have time to prepare. It runs at the same accelerated pace as everything else on this beach. The disease gets all the same extra time as the body does. That's the cruelty of this place. It doesn't discriminate. Age, illness, healing, decay, everything moves faster. Everything, she tells Guy. Not all of it maybe, but enough. And the thing Vicky Krieps does in this moment is remarkable. Priska isn't performing fear. She's managing it, keeping it compressed, the way someone does when they've already had a little time to live with bad news and have learned to carry its weight. The beach didn't give her the tumor. She brought it here. The beach just sped up the schedule. There is no hospital. There's no medication beyond whatever people stuffed into their beach bags. No sterile anything, no proper tools, no proper light, no proper anything. There's sand and rock and ocean and the kind of heat that sits on your shoulders all afternoon. Charles kneels beside her. Whatever is fracturing inside him. And it's fracturing, visibly, in increments, his composure developing cracks the way old paint does, starting at the edges and working in. The surgeon part of him is still intact, still operational. He asks questions in that clipped, efficient way that doctors have when they're assessing rather than comforting, and Priska answers them with the same efficiency. Two people treating this like a problem to be solved rather than a catastrophe to be survived. That shared denial is somehow one of the most human things in the whole film. He's going to have to operate. On the beach, with what they have. The surgery sequence is the part of old that people who've seen it don't easily forget. Not because it's gory, exactly. Shyamalan isn't going for shock value visceral. It's upsetting for a different reason. It's upsetting because of how matter-of-fact it has to be. Charles directs people around him, asks for specific things from bags, works with what he's given. Guy holds Priska's hand. Maddox looks away. Trent watches, because Trent watches everything and always has. It's how he processes the world, and his face during this scene is a whole story by itself. The ocean keeps moving like none of this is happening. The waves roll in. The water is still that impossible blue. 2 feet away from where an emergency surgery is being performed in the open air, the beach looks like a screensaver. The contrast is what Shyamalan keeps returning to throughout the film, the way terrible things happen inside beautiful frames. It's not a new trick, but he's especially deliberate about it here, and it works because the beauty stops feeling reassuring very quickly. By this point in the film, the water and the light and the white sand feel hostile, pretty things that are watching. Charles gets the tumor out. That sentence takes 3 seconds to read and the surgery takes longer. Long enough for everyone involved to age through it. Long enough for the tension to stretch past what's comfortable. But he gets it out. Priska is breathing. The immediate crisis passes, and there's a moment where relief almost touches the scene before the beach reminds everyone where they are. The thing is, Charles is now sweating in a way that isn't just heat. Something behind his eyes has shifted since the surgery, since the effort of holding himself together through it, since the medication continuing its quiet arithmetic in the wrong direction. Rufus Sewell has been doing careful, specific work with Charles this whole film, playing someone who is genuinely skilled and genuinely dangerous, and making sure you understand that both things are equally true at the same time. The capacity that made him a good surgeon is the same capacity that makes him frightening when it goes sideways. The intelligence is still there. The precision is still there. The problem is that both of those things are now being aimed in directions that don't follow normal logic. He starts talking differently. Not rambling, not obviously incoherent, but the connections between his thoughts develop gaps. He references things that don't connect to the current moment. His attention snaps from person to person with too much intensity. Crystal watches him the way a person watches a dog that's been cornered, carefully, from a slight distance without making it obvious that they're watching. Brendan is bleeding again. The wound from Charles's knife healed earlier. The body, accelerated, ran through enough time to close it. But hemophilia isn't a wound. It's a condition, and the condition is still there, still running alongside every biological process this beach is fast-forwarding. And as the afternoon extends, as more time piles up in compressed form, Brendan's body is accumulating the toll of a disease that doesn't heal the same way a cut does. He's pale, the kind of pale that means the blood loss is serious. Jaren stays close to him, doing what he can with what's available, which isn't much. Patricia is near, trying to help, trying to keep Brendan calm, because panic raises blood pressure, and raised blood pressure is the last thing anyone needs right now. The beach is smaller than it was this morning, not physically. The cove hasn't changed, but the space feels tighter now. There are bodies resting, bodies hurting, a woman recovering from improvised surgery on the sand, a man whose mind is running hot and wrong, children who are no longer the children who got in the minivan this morning. The whole group has contracted into something exhausted and afraid and increasingly unable to pretend otherwise. Charles moves toward Brendan. Not aggressively, not at first. He walks over with the body language of someone who wants to help. Someone resuming the role of the person with medical knowledge, the person who just successfully handled an impossible surgery. Jaren doesn't step aside exactly, but he doesn't fully block the path either, because Charles is still Charles, still the surgeon, still the authority, still the person whose credentials and bearing have been working on everyone's instincts since they arrived. What happens in the next few minutes is hard to watch. Not in a cinematic sense. Shyamalan shoots it with the same natural light and open-frame compositions he uses for the rest of the film. It's hard to watch because you can see it coming and you can't stop it. Charles's attention fixes on Brendan in a way that has nothing clinical in it anymore. The logic running through his head is only legible to him. He's operating on a version of reality that has diverged from the one everyone else is standing in, and the divergence has been accelerating all afternoon along with everything else. He kills Brendan. The specifics of how are less important than the weight of it. What matters is the aftermath. The silence on the beach, the way the group recoils and then freezes, the way Charles stands with an expression that doesn't quite register what he's done, like a man who acted on an instruction that no longer exists. Guy and Jaren pull him back. Crystal says nothing. She watches her husband with an expression that might be recognition, like she's seen this coming, has always known it could come, has just been hoping the timeline was longer. It wasn't longer. Nothing on this beach is longer than it should be. The afternoon light is starting to shift. Not sunset yet, not close, but the quality of the light has changed in the way it does mid-afternoon. Slightly less vertical, slightly more golden, the shadows starting to lengthen. Normally that light is beautiful. Here it means time is passing, and time is the thing that is killing all of them. Guy sits near Priska, who is resting, watching her breathe with the careful attention of a man who has spent today discovering that the things he calculated risk around were never the real risks. An actuary who couldn't calculate this. There's something almost darkly funny about that if you're the kind of person who finds dark things funny, which this film generally is. It's not a comedy, but it has that undercurrent of bitter absurdity that Shyamalan leans into occasionally, like the universe is making a very specific kind of joke. Maddox checks on Trent. He's sitting apart from the adults, drawing shapes in the sand, the way he did when he was 6 and the world was still comprehensible. His hands are older now, his face is older, but the habit is the same. Some things survive the acceleration. Charles is quiet now, seated. The knife is somewhere that isn't his hand. The dangerous momentum of whatever overtook him has passed for the moment, the way storms pass, and everyone knows what it means when a storm passes, that there was one and that there could be another. The beach still holds them. Agnes is still where she fell. Brendan is gone. 2 people who came down that jungle path this morning and won't go back up it. The rest of them are sitting with the specific knowledge that the longer they stay, the more that number grows, and nobody has found a way out yet. Not one that works. Trent stares at the water, erases his shapes in the sand, starts over. Trent is 6 years old in his memory and a teenager on his body, and those 2 things don't line up. That's the specific horror of what the beach is doing to the kids, and it's different from what it's doing to the adults. The adults are losing time they had. Trent and Kara and Maddox are being handed time they haven't lived. Years of experience, of context, of the slow accumulation of understanding that turns a child into a person who knows what their body means. And none of it comes with the actual experience, just the physical fact of it, the body without the map. Maddox is handling it better. Partly because she's older and partly because she's always been the kind of person who turns inward when things get overwhelming. She finds corners of the cove to sit in, watches, processes. She asks questions when she has them and stays quiet when she doesn't. Trent is not Maddox. Alex Wolff takes over the role now, and he plays Trent as someone operating at the very edge of what he can comprehend. Not stupid, not panicking, but stretched. Older face, older body, still young eyes. He moves through the beach with the specific awkwardness of someone who doesn't recognize the machine they're living in, and there's no cruelty in how the film frames this, just honesty, which almost makes it worse. Kara has been quiet since she got here. Charles's daughter. She arrived as a child and she's a teenager now, played by Eliza Scanlon, and she's been sitting mostly at the edge of things while her father deteriorated and her mother kept her careful distance, and the adults cycled through panic and argument and grief. She's been watching all of it, processing all of it, alone in the way that kids become alone when the adults around them are too consumed by their own fear to notice. She and Trent find each other the way people in crisis find the person nearest their own age and orbit each other, not out of attraction in any meaningful teenage sense, but out of the simpler need to be near someone who is in the same version of this nightmare you're in. They talk, they sit together. There's a gentleness between them that the film is careful with. What happens next? The film doesn't sensationalize. Two children in bodies that have been physically aged into adolescence with no understanding of what those bodies mean or how they work, and no adult paying close enough attention to see where this is heading. It goes where it goes. The camera doesn't follow. Shyamalan gives you enough to understand what happened and nothing beyond that. No score swelling, no dramatic framing, just the quiet, terrible fact of it. Two kids who were handed a physical reality they had no preparation for, in a place with no protection, with no one to tell them what they needed to hear before it mattered. The adults find out. The reaction is complicated, because who is there to be angry at? The beach. Time, the thing that took their children's childhoods and ran them through a machine and handed back teenagers before anyone was ready. There's grief in the adults' faces that has no clear target, and that might be the most accurate emotional note the film hits in this whole sequence. Some of the worst things that happen don't have a villain you can point at. A few more hours pass, the light keeps shifting, the cove stays sealed. Guy's vision has started going at the edges, blurry patches that come and go, that he blinks against and doesn't mention to Priska because she's still recovering from the surgery and he doesn't want to add his deteriorating eyesight to her list of things to worry about. Priska has noticed anyway. She always notices. She just hasn't said anything either. That's the particular language of a marriage that's been together long enough. The things you both know and neither of you says. Patricia's headaches are getting worse. She mentions them to Jaren in a low voice, not wanting to alarm anyone, and Jaren's face doesn't alarm anyone either, but his eyes do the thing medical professionals' eyes do when they're calculating how bad something is and arriving at an answer they don't want. The beach has a rhythm now, if you can call it that. Short windows of awful things punctuated by longer stretches of quiet dread. The quiet is almost harder, because the quiet gives everyone time to think, and thinking on this beach means running the numbers forward and seeing where they end. Kara is pregnant. She knows before anyone else does, in the way bodies know things. And when she tells Trent, there's a moment between them that's impossible to categorize. Two children who shouldn't be having this conversation, who don't have the vocabulary for it, who are being asked to process something that adults with full life experience struggle with. Trent goes still. You can see him trying to find the version of himself that knows how to respond to this, and that version doesn't exist yet, might never have existed in the normal timeline, and certainly doesn't exist here. The adults are told. The reaction lands differently on each person. Priska, still fragile from surgery, grips Guy's hand tighter. Jaren does his quiet calculation. Patricia moves toward Kara immediately, therapist instincts intact even as everything else on this beach is falling apart, crouching down to Kara's level and speaking in that careful, grounded way she has. Charles barely registers it. Whatever is left of Charles's attention is pointed somewhere internal at this point, somewhere that the rest of them can't follow. The pregnancy moves at the same speed as everything else. This is the part where the film stops pulling punches. The accelerated timeline doesn't pause for this, doesn't make an exception because the situation is already unbearable. The hours on this beach are years, and years is enough, and Kara's body runs through all of it with the same brutal efficiency the beach applies to everything. The baby is born on the sand. There is a moment, a brief, specific moment, where it's alive, breathing. Small in the way that newborns are small, in that way that makes you realize how much the body is still building itself even after it arrives. Kara holds it. She doesn't have words for this either. Nobody does. The sound of the ocean is underneath everything. The baby dies within minutes. It can't feed, can't take in what it needs fast enough. The time that compresses everything else compresses this too. The weeks and months a newborn needs to build the systems that keep it alive, gone before they can be used. The body came through, but the time to survive in it didn't. This moment is the hardest beat in the entire film, not because it's graphic, not because the score tells you to feel something. Shyamalan is restrained here in a way that costs him nothing and gives the scene everything. It's hard because it's so quiet. because Kara just sits there afterward with something in her face that a teenager shouldn't have in their face, a weight that belongs to much older grief that gets worn in over years of being carried. She got that grief in an afternoon. Trent doesn't look away. He stays there, with her. He doesn't know what to do, and he does it anyway. Just stays, which is often the only thing available and the most important thing there is. The sun has been up long enough that everyone's body is showing the math. The adults who arrived in their 30s and 40s are reading older now. Not ancient, but worn. The particular tiredness of middle age accelerated, the body's little complaints louder than they should be for people who woke up this morning with decades ahead of them. Guy rubs his eyes and they stay blurry for longer than before. Priska moves more carefully than she did at the resort, her recovery running against the clock in both directions, healed by time, also consumed by it. Maddox sits with Kara. She doesn't say much. She's a teenager in age now, maybe 20 by this point, and she has something that Trent is still working toward, a kind of steadiness under pressure that looks like maturity because it is maturity, just compressed, earned in hours instead of years. She puts her hand on Kara's back and leaves it there. The group has gotten smaller, quieter. The social structures that formed in the minivan, the polite introductions, the careful friendliness of strangers, feel like they belong to a different era entirely, which they do. This morning was a long time ago. Charles is asleep, or appears to be. Nobody is comfortable with that distinction. Jaren watches him. 3 people die in this stretch of the film, and none of them die the way horror movies usually kill people. No monster, no dramatic confrontation, no moment where the victim realizes what's coming and has time to react. Jaren, Patricia, and Kara each go the way people actually go when a situation has already run out of options. From exhaustion, from the body giving out, from a desperate attempt to find an exit in a place that doesn't have one. The deaths in this section are quieter than anything Charles did with a knife, and somehow heavier. Jaren makes his decision without announcing it. That's the kind of man he is. A nurse, someone who has spent his career taking action inside other people's crises, keeping his own reactions secondary, doing what needs to be done while everyone else falls apart. He's been watching the beach work through the group all afternoon. He's run the numbers the same way Guy has, just from a medical angle rather than an actuarial one, and what he's arrived at is the same conclusion. The longer they stay, the fewer of them there will be. Somebody has to try the water. The cove opens outward. The rock walls that trap them on land don't extend forever. If you swim far enough, past the cove's natural boundary, you should be outside whatever radius the beach uses to drag people back. That's the theory. The blackouts happen when you move toward the land exit, but swimming is different, or might be different, or at least hasn't been tested by anyone willing to go far enough to find out. Jaren is willing to go far enough. The swim looks possible from shore. The open water past the cove isn't rough, the distance isn't absurd, and he's fit enough that under normal circumstances this would be straightforward. He tells Patricia where he's going. She holds his face in her hands for a moment and says something to him that the film doesn't give us, and he goes. He doesn't come back. You don't see it happen. The camera stays on the shore, on Patricia's face as she watches, on the point where the water bends around the rock formation and becomes ocean rather than cove. She watches that point for a long time. The rest of the group figures it out from her expression before anyone says a word. The blackouts, or something else, or the ocean itself, it doesn't matter. Jaren went in and the water kept him. Patricia sits down where she was standing and doesn't move for a while. She's known something was coming for herself. That's the impression Nikki Amuka Bird gives throughout this film, a woman who is present and warm and professionally grounded right up until the moment she can't be, and who has been tracking her own symptoms with the same careful attention she'd give a client. The seizures? The headaches that Jaren was quietly calculating toward the end. A therapist who understands what's happening inside her own body well enough to know it isn't good. Epilepsy accelerated, the brain running through time that it was never designed to run through this fast. The electrical misfires that her medication normally manages getting louder, more frequent, harder to recover from between episodes. The seizure that kills her comes without a long warning sequence. She's talking to Maddox, actually talking, a real conversation, the kind Patricia has been good at all day, the kind that makes people feel seen and steadied. And then she's not. Her body does what bodies with severe epilepsy do in the worst moments, and there is nothing to be done, and everyone there knows it. And knowing it doesn't make the helplessness any smaller. Maddox stays with her through it. After. She's a young woman by now, early 20s maybe, in this accelerated timeline, and she handles it with a composure that doesn't look like composure so much as necessity. She's been watching people leave this beach all afternoon. The grief doesn't get smaller with practice, but you do get faster at carrying it. Guy holds Priska. She presses her face into his shoulder. There's a moment between them that doesn't need words. Probably couldn't use them effectively anyway, because Priska's hearing has been going for the last couple of hours, sound fading at the edges and then the center, the beach becoming quieter to her while it gets louder in every other sense. The cliff face is maybe 30 feet, maybe less. The black rock that walls in the cove has ledges, handholds, looks climbable to someone who is desperate enough and has nothing left to anchor them to the sand. Kara has been on the sand all afternoon. She buried her baby on this beach. She watched her father become a stranger and her mother retreat into her own world, and the two people nearest her own experience die within hours of each other. She's a teenager carrying the grief of decades and the exhaustion of someone who has run out of reasons to stay still. She starts climbing. Nobody sees her go. Or maybe someone sees her and doesn't stop her in time, doesn't reach her before she's already 2 ledges up. And by then, stopping her means shouting and disturbing her grip, and the math on that is worse than letting her climb. She moves with the focused, deliberate pace of someone who has made a decision and is committed to it, not suicidal, not surrendering, but going. Getting out, refusing to accept that the cove is permanent. She makes it further than you expect. The handholds are real, the ledges hold. For a moment, watching her, there's something close to hope in the scene. Not comfortable hope, the painful kind, the kind that arrives in situations where hoping costs something. She's higher than anyone's been, past the point where the blackouts took everyone else back, and then her grip slips. Whether the blackout takes her or her hands simply fail doesn't matter in the outcome. She falls from height, and the rock face is unforgiving, and Trent is on the sand below and sees it happen, and the sound he makes is the sound of a person who is too young and too old at the same time for what they just witnessed. He goes to her. She's gone before he gets there. The beach takes her quickly, the same efficiency it applies to everything. Trent sits beside her for a long time. The adults don't pull him away. There are moments where the kindest thing you can do for someone is just let them be in the worst of it without trying to make it smaller than it is. Guy's eyesight is close to gone now. He navigates by memory and by touch, by Priska's hand and the sound of the water orienting him in the cove. Gael García Bernal plays this without making it a performance. No dramatic moment of, I can't see. Just a gradual narrowing, a man adapting, his other senses stepping up to compensate the way the body does when it has to. He still talks, still thinks. The actuary brain is still running, still trying to find the angle that hasn't been tried, still refusing to arrive at the conclusion that there isn't one. Priska reads his lips now more than she hears him. They've developed a new shorthand in the last hour, a compressed version of whatever language they've spoken to each other for 15 years of marriage, adapted in real time to what they have left to work with. It should be devastating to watch. And it is, but it's also quietly extraordinary, because what you're watching is 2 people who came to this beach in the slow process of ending a marriage, spend their last hours building something new between the wreckage. The irony isn't lost. An actuary who calculated every risk except this one. A museum curator devoted to preservation, watching everything she loves change faster than she can hold it. Time, which was always the thing quietly threading through both of their lives, finally visible and enormous and impossible to look away from. The beach is different now, not physically. The cove is exactly as it was when the minivan pulled away from the jungle path and left them here. The water is still blue, the sand is still pale, the rock walls stand exactly as they stood at noon. But Agnes is here, Brendan is here, Patricia, Jaren, Kara and her baby. The living are fewer and older and hollowed in a way that rested faces don't show. Charles is a figure at the edge of things, awake now, moving through his own interior world, occasionally coherent and occasionally somewhere else entirely. Crystal has retreated as far from him as the cove allows. Maddox and Trent sit near their parents with the specific closeness of children who have learned today that proximity is not a given. There's a notebook. It's been there, half buried near one of the rock walls, and Trent finds it the way kids find things, not by looking, but by just being low to the ground and paying attention to the wrong things at the right time. He pulls it free and opens it and starts reading, and the expression on his face changes as he reads. He passes it to Maddox. She reads it faster than he did because Maddox processes things faster, always has, and when she's done, her face has that stillness that means she's arrived somewhere significant and is deciding what to do with it. She shows Guy. He holds it close, squinting through the blur of failing vision, and reads what he can. Someone kept records. That's the first thing that registers about the notebook. Not what's in it, but the fact that it exists at all. Someone sat on this beach, in this cove, and wrote things down. Names, dates, medical conditions listed with the matter-of-fact precision of someone filling out intake forms. Ovarian tumor, hemophilia, epilepsy, cardiac arrhythmia, hypocalcemia. The handwriting changes halfway through. Different people, different visits, different hands. The notebook has been here longer than any of them, long enough to collect a history. Trent counts the names. There are dozens. The weight of that number is specific and terrible. Not just because of what it means for the people whose names are there, all dead, presumably, all run through the same accelerated horror, but because of what it means for the people reading it right now. They aren't an accident. They aren't the first. Someone chose them for this beach with the same deliberate care they used to choose the ones before them and the ones before those. Every family on that minivan was selected. Guy holds the notebook close to his failing eyes and pieces it together slowly, the actuary brain running its last clear miles. The medical conditions aren't random. There's a pattern, specific conditions, specific people, a different combination each time, like a trial, like someone running tests, cycling through variables, measuring outcomes against a controlled set of subjects who never agreed to be subjects. Maddox says it before anyone else does, flat and certain. They sent us here on purpose. Nobody argues. The resort manager's face flickers into memory. That smile, that careful attentiveness, the way he watched guests move through the lobby, the way he made the beach feel like a gift. The recommendation delivered with such specific warmth to specific people. You think back through every interaction at the resort and it recontextualizes in real time, every piece of performed hospitality suddenly wearing its actual shape. He knew. He always knew. The fruit drinks, the welcome, the perfect room, all of it packaging around something that had nothing to do with a vacation. This part hits the group like a second wave of grief. The first wave was the beach itself, the aging, the deaths, the impossible trap. This is different. This is the discovery that the trap had a builder, that somewhere beyond those rock walls, people made decisions in offices and conference rooms that ended with Agnes dying on the sand, and Brendan's blood not clotting, and Kara's baby not surviving its first hour. Guy doesn't say much. He sits with it, jaw tight, the way people sit with anger when there's no available direction to point it. Priska reads his expression without needing sound. The light goes amber, then orange, then gone. Night on the cove is different from night anywhere else. No ambient glow from roads or buildings, no light pollution softening the dark, just the stars and the water and the black rock walls and the people still alive on the sand between them. The temperature drops enough to matter. The group pulls together instinctively, the surviving adults close to the surviving children, the cove feeling smaller in the dark even though the geometry hasn't changed. Charles has been quiet for the last stretch of light. That quietness by now is not reassuring to anyone. It's the quietness of a storm system sitting still, pressure building without release, direction unclear. Crystal has positioned herself away from him, with the practiced casualness of someone who has spent years learning to read his moods and act on the readings before anyone else notices. She's noticed. The attack, when it comes, doesn't announce itself. Charles is on his feet before anyone registers he's moving, and he's moving fast, the speed of someone operating on adrenaline and internal logic that has completely detached from the shared reality of everyone else on the beach. He goes for Guy first. Guy can barely see him coming. There's a struggle that is frightening in its efficiency. Charles is a large man, and his schizophrenic break has stripped away whatever social moderation normally sits between his size and how he uses it. Priska shouts something. She can't hear herself well enough to know how loud it comes out. People pull at Charles, drag him back, and there's a brutal few seconds where the outcome is genuinely unclear. Guy takes damage, a hit that matters, that puts him down briefly, that adds injury to a body already running out of runway, but Charles gets pulled off. He stands in the dark, breathing hard, looking at the group around him like they're strangers in his dream, and the temporary clearing passes and he's back to wherever his mind is currently living. Maddox and Trent run. Not far, there's nowhere far to run on a cove this size, but away from Charles, toward the rock wall, toward the shallow cave opening they've noticed but not used until now. Something is wrong with Crystal's back. It's been developing for hours, visible if you were looking, which most people weren't because the other catastrophes kept pulling focus. The hypocalcemia, the calcium disorder she arrived with, has been running its accelerated course the same way every other condition on this beach runs. Our body's calcium processing has gone wrong in a way that's showing on the outside now. A growth, a hardening, her spine, her shoulders, the geometry of her posture all shifting into something that doesn't correspond to what the human body is supposed to do. She moves differently than she did at noon, more rigid, the way she turns her head, the way her arms hang. There's something underneath the skin that has changed shape. In the dark, it's worse. She finds Trent and Maddox at the cave entrance, and here's the thing that makes this sequence so deeply uncomfortable. Crystal isn't a villain in any conventional sense. She's a woman whose body is betraying her in the most extreme way possible, whose husband has lost his mind, whose world has been compressing toward catastrophe since the minivan ride. Whatever she's doing now, cornering the kids, blocking the cave entrance with her altered frame, it doesn't read as malice exactly. It reads as desperation wearing a frightening shape. Trent and Maddox back into the cave. The cave is shallow, barely deep enough to be called a cave at all, more of an indent in the rock face, enough for two people to stand inside, but not enough for comfort, not enough for distance from the entrance. Crystal follows them in, and the calcium deposits have done things to her body's articulation that means she moves in ways that a body shouldn't move, angles that are wrong, a fluidity in the wrong places, a rigidity in the others. Maddox is calm in that way. She gets the inward processing calm that looks from the outside like composure and is actually something more like controlled terror. She keeps herself between Crystal and Trent. She talks. She uses the even voice that Patricia would have recognized, the voice that says, "I'm not panicking, so you don't have to either," and she aims it directly at Crystal like a steady beam. Whether it reaches her is hard to say. Crystal's face in this moment is hard to read, contorted by the physical transformation, by pain, by something else that might be grief or might be the last clear thought she has. She collapses against the cave wall. The calcium that has been reworking her body for hours has reached some kind of terminal point, some threshold past which the body simply cannot maintain itself. And the end comes, the way ends come on this beach, without fanfare, without a final speech, just a person and then not a person. Crystal folds into the rock and goes still, the terrible angles of her body locking into place, and the cave is quiet. Maddox and Trent stand there in the dark. Trent reaches for his sister's hand. She lets him take it. Outside, the ocean moves against the rock, and somewhere on the beach their parents are calling their names, and the stars are doing what stars do, staying exactly where they are while everything below them changes. The notebook is still in Guy's hand when the kids come back out. He's sitting with Priska in the dark, the two of them close enough that their shoulders touch, and when Maddox and Trent come around the rock formation alive and upright, the relief on their parents' faces is profound and wordless. Guy pulls Trent close with one arm, blind and reaching, finding him by sound. Priska holds Maddox's face in her hands and looks at her daughter, this young woman who this morning was 11 years old, and there's something in Priska's expression that holds 15 years of motherhood compressed into a single look. Charles is somewhere at the far edge of the cove, not a threat at this exact moment, but present, and the group keeps him in peripheral awareness the way you keep a storm in peripheral awareness, not staring at it directly, but never entirely forgetting it's there. The notebook sits between them like evidence, because that's what it is, evidence that this was designed, that the beach is a mechanism, that the mechanism has a purpose, and the purpose has authors. The resort manager and whatever institution is behind him didn't do this out of cruelty as an end in itself. The pattern of conditions in the notebook is too specific, too deliberate. This is a clinical trial, or has been for a very long time, running on people who signed up for a beach vacation and got something else entirely. Trent, sitting in the dark next to his father, suddenly thinks of something, a word, a name, a conversation that happened when he was 6 years old, which, on this beach, feels like a lifetime ago, because it was. He thinks of Idlib. The knife has been on the beach since Brendan. It moved around. Someone picked it up, set it down somewhere safer, or what passed for safer on a cove where nothing was particularly safe anymore. Priska knows where it is. She's been tracking it the way you track things when your hearing is nearly gone and your husband can barely see, and the man who used it once has been circling the edge of your awareness all night like a weather system that hasn't decided what it wants to do yet. Charles decides for her. His last coherent episode. if coherent is even close to the right word, comes in the deep dark of the night, and it comes for Guy. Maybe because Guy has been the one reasoning with him all day, the voice that kept trying to find the Charles still underneath the fracturing, the person who kept making eye contact and speaking slowly and treating him like he was still reachable. Maybe that's precisely why. Reason, to a mind that has fully left reason's territory, can feel like an attack. Guy goes down hard. Priska moves before she decides to. That's the only way to describe it. Her body makes the decision, and she follows it, crossing the sand with the knife already in her hand, and she cuts Charles. Not killing. She's not trying to kill him, doesn't have that in her, but she opens a wound deep enough to matter, deep enough to stop him, and Charles staggers back and sits down in the sand, breathing in long, jagged pulls. On a normal timeline, infection takes days. The skin reddens, the body mounts a response, things escalate over a medically legible arc. You have time to notice, time to treat, time to make decisions. The beach compresses that arc into hours. The wound goes wrong almost immediately, visible wrong, the redness spreading faster than redness should spread, the skin around it changing in ways that are unambiguous to anyone watching. Jaren isn't here to name it precisely anymore, but you don't need a nurse to read this. Charles's body, already aged well past where it should be, already running on the last reserves of whatever kept it functional, has no capacity left to fight what's entered through that cut. The infection moves through him like it's on the same accelerated schedule as everything else on this beach. It is. He dies before sunrise. Not violently. The storm has finally passed, the internal weather exhausted, and what's left at the end is something quieter than what came before. Charles, somewhere in his last hours, seems to return to something approaching himself. Rufus Sewell plays these final moments with a stillness that is genuinely heartbreaking. A man surfacing briefly from somewhere deep, lucid enough to know how far under he's been, not long enough to do anything about it. He says something. Whether anyone can hear it clearly, whether it's meant for Crystal or Kara or himself, the film doesn't clarify. Then he's gone. And the beach is a very different place than it was when a minivan full of strangers pulled up to it. They find each other in the dark. Guy, Priska, Maddox, Trent. Not physically lost, the cove isn't large enough for that, but there's a gravitational thing that happens in the aftermath of Charles, a pulling together that doesn't need to be discussed. Maddox is in her 20s now. Trent is close behind. Guy is a man in his 60s with no working eyesight, navigating by memory and touch and the sound of his family's voices. Priska reads lips in the dark as best she can, fills the gaps with context. With 15 years of knowing exactly how this man finishes sentences, they sit together, the four of them. Whatever has been between Guy and Priska, the thing that was ending when they checked into that resort, the quiet conclusion they were both heading toward, is somewhere underneath all of this, still technically true, still unresolved. But the beach has a way of reorganizing what matters, not erasing the real things, but putting them in order. And right now, in the last dark hours on a cove that has taken everyone else, what matters is each other. Trent is quiet for a long stretch. Then, the word game. He says it half to himself first. The way people say things when a thought arrives fully formed and they're not sure yet whether it's useful or just their brain reaching for something comfortable in an uncomfortable place. But it keeps being there. The word game. Idlib. The boy at the resort with the big vocabulary and the uncle who works there and the easy, immediate friendship that 6-year-olds build in 10 minutes and carry for a lifetime. They swapped words back and forth. Big ones. Impressive ones. It was a game. It was fun. It was the kind of thing you remember from being 6, because being 6 is when everything is still vivid and unfiltered, and the world hasn't taught you yet which things to pay attention to and which to let go. Idlib told him something about the beach, not directly, not in the way of someone passing information, but the way kids talk in the middle of other things, the way a detail slips out when you're not guarding what you say because you're 6 and you don't guard anything yet. Something about the coral. A passage, an underwater tunnel through the rock formation that frames the cove, not the land path, not swimming out through open water, but through the rock itself, low and submerged, navigable if you know it's there. Idlib knew it was there because his uncle worked at the resort. His uncle worked at the resort because the resort uses this beach. His uncle knew about the coral passage because that's how you get out when the beach doesn't let you walk out. Trent sits up straighter. I know how we leave. Guy processes it with his eyes closed, running the logic, the actuary brain doing what it's always done, testing an idea against its own weight, looking for the place where it breaks. It doesn't break. Opening pressed fresh tunnel through the coral base of the rock wall would circumvent the path. The blackouts happen on land and in open water. Nobody has tried going through rock. Nobody knew there was anything to try. Maddox is already on her feet. The search for the passage takes time they're acutely aware of not having. They move along the base of the rock wall, hands reading the coral in the dark, Trent directing from memory. Not precise memory, 6-year-old memory, the kind that stored a feeling and a direction rather than GPS coordinates, but memory on a beach this size doesn't need to be precise. There's only so much wall to cover. Priska finds it. Her hands moving along the base of the rock where it meets the water, hit the gap, low, submerged, the opening narrow enough that you'd swim through rather than walk, wide enough that swimming through is possible. She pulls Trent's hand to it. He feels it and goes completely still for a moment. That's it. The water is black past the first few feet. No visibility beyond what the faint light allows near the surface. No way to see what's ahead. No way to know how long the tunnel runs before it opens on the other side. You'd be swimming through rock in the dark with one breath and the faith that a 6-year-old's second-hand memory of something an uncle mentioned was accurate enough to stake 4 lives on. Guy goes first. Blind already, he's the best argument for the darkness not mattering. Priska guides him to the opening, holds his face and says something against his cheek that he feels rather than hears. He nods. He goes under. The seconds stretch. Maddox watches the opening. Trent watches the opening. Priska watches the opening with her hand pressed flat against the rock and her breath held without realizing she's holding it. There's no sound from inside the tunnel, nothing to read, just the ocean doing its indifferent thing around all of them. Then, gone longer than seems right, longer than a breath should last. Long enough that Trent takes half a step toward the water before Maddox catches his arm, and then the gap in the rock goes still, and then it doesn't. Bubbles, ripples moving outward from the opening in the pattern that a body makes when it pushes through a space rather than into it. Guy surfaced on the other side. He's through. Priska goes next, smooth and certain, and then Maddox, and Trent is last. He stands alone at the base of the rock wall for exactly 1 second. The kid who arrived here this morning, who played word games with a stranger's nephew, who sat beside Kara in her worst moment and didn't leave, who found the notebook, who remembered the thing that mattered when it mattered, and he goes under. The tunnel is cold, narrower than comfortable, the coral close on both sides, the dark absolute. He moves by feel, hands on the walls, pushing forward with everything his older body has that his 6-year-old self never did. The seconds in the tunnel don't run on beach time. They run on the time inside a held breath, which is its own kind of acceleration. He surfaces. Open ocean, stars above him, real and enormous, the rock wall of the cove already behind him. His family is in the water, treading, real and present and alive. The beach is behind that wall. Everything that happened there is behind that wall. For the first time since the minivan left the jungle path, the water in front of them leads somewhere. Guy reaches out blindly and finds Trent's arm. They swim. The shore they reach isn't far, a stretch of beach outside the cove, connected to the land, connected to roads, connected to everything the resort manager's paradise promised and didn't deliver. They pull themselves out of the water and sit on the ground and breathe. Just breathe. The sound of the ocean is the same sound it always was, but it's different here. Out here, it's just water. Out here, it means nothing about time. Trent is in his 20s and has lived most of a lifetime in a single day, and the ground under his hands is the most solid thing he's ever felt. Maddox lies back and looks at the sky. Priska and Guy find each other's hands and hold on. They don't find a phone first. They find a road. A dirt road that connects to a paved one, and the paved one connects to civilization. And civilization means people who haven't spent the last however many hours on a beach that eats time. A passing car stops. The driver takes one look at this group. 4 people in beach clothes, soaked, moving with the careful deliberateness of the extremely exhausted, 2 of them visibly elderly, and doesn't ask many questions before driving them to the nearest police station. The officer at the desk starts with routine questions. Name, age, what happened? Trent answers. His voice is steady in the way that only arrives after everything has already fallen apart. The calm on the other side of shock, where you've run out of the energy that panic requires and what's left is just clarity. He talks. The officer listens with an expression that moves through skepticism and out the other side into something else entirely as the details accumulate. He picks up the phone. The notebook goes on the desk between them. Here's what the investigation finds, and here's the part of old that recontextualizes every single scene you've already watched. The resort isn't a resort, not really. The hospitality, the rooms, the staff, the fruit drinks, and the impeccable service, all of it is infrastructure around something else. A pharmaceutical operation, company testing experimental drugs and testing them on a timeline that normal clinical trials can't provide. Drug trials take years, decades sometimes. You need to watch a medication work through a human body over time, watch the long-term effects, watch what happens when someone takes something for 20 years or 40 years or the full arc of a life. The beach compresses that arc into a single day. Guests are selected for their conditions, specific, targeted, a different combination of illnesses and disorders each visit, cycling through variables the way a real clinical trial cycles through them. An ovarian tumor to test a cancer drug, epilepsy to test a seizure medication, hemophilia, hypocalcemia, cardiac conditions, all of them chosen deliberately against whatever compound is currently being trialed. The guests age through decades on the sand. The drugs either work or they don't. The company watches the results. Then they send another minivan. The people on the beach are not patients. They were never told they were patients. They never consented to anything beyond a complimentary vacation at a beautiful resort. The forms they signed at check-in, and there were forms, of course there were forms, there were always forms, buried the relevant language so deep in the legal architecture that nobody reads it. Because nobody reads it, because nobody expects a resort to be asking permission to use their body as a 30-year drug trial that will be completed by Tuesday. This is the twist, and it lands with the weight that the best Shyamalan twists land with. Not as a surprise exactly, more as a confirmation. The dread that's been sitting in the film since the manager's first smile, the sense that the hospitality was always a costume, the notebook full of names with medical conditions, it all assembles into a picture that was already almost visible. You suspected something deliberate. You just didn't know the shape of it yet. Now you do. The resort manager doesn't run. That detail matters. When the authorities arrive, and they arrive with the kind of force that a notebook full of decades of deaths tends to generate, he's still at the resort, still dressed well. The composure that carried him through every guest interaction, through every careful smile and curated recommendation, is present right up until it isn't. There's a moment where he sees the officers coming and the composure just drops. Not dramatically, not a villain's monologue or a last-ditch escape attempt. The mask comes off the way. Masks come off in real life, quietly, without ceremony, the face underneath it tired and suddenly old. Gustav Hammersten plays this collapse with restraint that the role earns. The manager has been the film's most controlled performance, barely a crack in the facade for the entire runtime, and watching it give way in 30 seconds of silent screen time is genuinely effective. He's taken into custody without incident. His staff, too. The operation behind the resort, the pharmaceutical company and the people who ran it, the chain of authority and decision-making that produced all those names in that notebook. All of it unravels from this point outward. The law has a lot of reading to do. Trent is in the police station when he sees him, a man his age, roughly, late 20s, sitting near the entrance, wearing a resort staff uniform that he hasn't changed out of yet. He's talking to an officer, answering questions with the careful honesty of someone who has been waiting to answer them for a while. His uncle worked at the resort. Past tense, now. Trent looks at him for a long moment. The man looks back. Recognition travels across the distance between them in the particular way it travels, between people who met when they were very young. Not the face exactly, because the face has changed, but something underneath the face, something in the eyes or the posture or whatever it is that persists through all the years of change and still says, I know you, idlib. They don't make a big scene of it. This isn't that kind of movie, and this isn't that kind of moment. Trent crosses the room. They sit together. And the word game that started when they were both 6 years old, two kids at a resort exchanging vocabulary for fun, closes its loop in a police station on the other side of the worst day of either of their lives. Trent puts the notebook on the table between them. Your uncle told you about the passage, he says. Idlib looks at the notebook, looks at Trent, nods. He told me it was wrong, Idlib says. What they were doing, he told me a long time ago. The notebook has everyone's names in it. All the visits, all the conditions, all the people who went to that beach and didn't come back the way they arrived. Idlib's testimony, combined with what the Kappas survived, combined with what's in those pages, it's enough. More than enough. The kind of enough that ends careers and closes companies and puts people in rooms they don't leave for a long time. The final scene of Old belongs to an aunt. Trent and Maddox's aunt, their mother's sister, gets a phone call from the police station. The call tells her what her niece and nephew have been through. The call does not fully prepare her for what she sees when they walk through the door. She's expecting children. She last saw them as children. She's going to see them as children, because that's who they are in her head. That's who they'll always be, in the way that family carries people frozen at particular ages in their memory, regardless of what time actually does. She opens the door to two adults in their 20s. The moment is played quietly, the way the whole film earns its emotional beats, not with swelling music telling you how to feel, not with extended close-ups fishing for tears. Just two people who used to be children standing in a doorway, and a woman whose face has to reroute everything it was about to do and find a different response entirely. She reaches for them anyway. Age and confusion and the complete collapse of what she expected. None of it stops her reaching for them. They go home. So what does old actually mean? Because Shyamalan isn't making a movie about a pharmaceutical conspiracy. That's the plot. But the film's real subject has been right there in the title, a single word that contains everything. Getting old. The fear of it. The speed of it. The way time runs out faster than you budgeted for. Every character on that beach was a version of that fear made literal. An actuary who built a career calculating futures and couldn't calculate his own. A curator devoted to preservation watching everything she loved change. A surgeon whose authority depended on certainty, destroyed by a disease that stripped certainty away. A therapist who held other people's realities together while her own came apart. The beach didn't invent any of their problems, it just accelerated them. And that's the film's sharpest observation, that the beach is a metaphor that doesn't need to be subtle because life already does this. Not in a day, but it happens. Bodies change, hearing goes, eyesight fades, the people you love get old and then they're gone, and the time between felt in retrospect like a single afternoon on a beach that moved too fast. What saves the Capas isn't fighting the time, it's each other. Trent's memory of a friendship. Priska's hands on the coral in the dark. Guy swimming blind through a tunnel because his family was on the other side of it. The film's answer to the fear of aging isn't a cure, it's connection, which is not a new answer, but Old earns it by making you feel the cost of the question first. Here's my honest take, since we've spent this much time together on it. Old is not a perfect film. The dialogue occasionally works against it. There are stretches, especially early on, where the characters state things directly in a way that feels like the screenplay checking boxes rather than people actually talking. The pacing in the middle section asks a lot of patience, and the twist, while effective, sits inside an ending that moves very quickly from revelation to resolution, almost too efficiently, like the film is eager to close what it opened. But the things it gets right, it gets really right. The premise is genuinely original. The physical horror, the idea of your own body as something that can be taken from you not through violence but through time, is more disturbing than most horror movies manage with explicit content. The performances, especially Vicky Krieps and Rufus Sewell, are doing work that elevates material that could easily have tipped into camp. And the image of two children sitting on a beach, becoming adults in an afternoon, losing everything that childhood was supposed to be, that image stays with you. Shyamalan gets criticized a lot, often fairly. But Old is a filmmaker fully committed to an idea, and commitment to an idea, even an imperfect one, produces something more interesting than safety does. This is not a safe movie. It's weird and uncomfortable and occasionally clunky and genuinely affecting, and I'd rather watch it 10 times than sit through another horror film that plays by every rule it knows. If you made it this far, you already know whether this one got under your skin. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit like and subscribe. It genuinely helps more than you'd think, and it keeps these long-form breakdowns coming. Drop a comment telling me which death on the beach hit you the hardest and why. I have a feeling the answers are going to be all over the place, and I want to know. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. And maybe don't accept any exclusive beach recommendations from resort managers you just met. Coverage, Shyamalan's cameo and what it means, cinematography breakdown, the graphic novel source, each character as a living symbol, the pharmaceutical angle in real-world context, why the film divides audiences, Shyamalan's career and where Old sits in it, Shyamalan's career and where Old sits in it, the ending's emotional architecture, what the film quietly gets right, honest final reckoning. Target, 4,010 words. Before we close the book on this one completely, there's a conversation worth having, not about the plot. We covered the plot. 8 parts, 17,000 words, every death on that beach accounted for. But Old is a film that rewards a second pass, and not just in the way thrillers reward second viewings once you know the twist. This one has layers that run underneath the story, choices Shyamalan made, with the camera, with the casting, with the source material, with his own presence in the film, that don't announce themselves. They just sit there, doing their work quietly, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. So let's go back in. The man behind the wheel, Shyamalan, is in this film. He appears as the driver of the van that takes the families to the beach, the minivan that winds through the jungle path and deposits everyone at the cove and then leaves. He's right there in the scene, driving, saying almost nothing, just a man doing a job, moving people from where they are to where they're going to be. This is not subtle once you know it. Shyamalan has inserted himself, literally, as the person responsible for getting his characters into the worst situation of their lives. He drives the van, he drops them off, he leaves. He's done cameos before. It's a running thing across his filmography, a Hitchcock habit carried forward. But this one is different from popping up in the background of a crowd scene. This is a functional role. The driver matters. Without the driver, nobody gets to the beach. And Shyamalan is the driver, which means he's standing in front of the camera and saying clearly, I put these people here, I'm doing this to them, and I'm going to leave and watch what happens. There's something genuinely funny about that if you're willing to find it funny. And there's something else underneath the funny part, an authorial honesty that's kind of refreshing. Most directors disappear into their films. Shyamalan made himself the agent of the horror, the person who delivers the premise and then drove away. You could read that as ego, and some people do. I read it as a director who is completely uninterested in pretending he's not pulling the strings. The camera doesn't behave. The cinematography in Old is one of the most talked about things about it, and not always positively. Mike Djoulakis shot the film, and the two of them, Djoulakis and Shyamalan, made a choice that is either brilliant or aggravating depending on your tolerance for deliberate discomfort, and that choice is this: the camera doesn't stay where you expect it to. Shyamalan shoots a lot of this film from the wrong angle. Characters in conversation are often framed off-center or from behind or with something in the foreground partially blocking the shot in a way that shouldn't work compositionally and technically doesn't work compositionally, but creates something else entirely. You're watching a scene and there's a rock in the way. You're watching a crucial emotional moment and the camera is looking at the back of someone's head. You want the face. You've been trained by a lifetime of cinema to expect the face in the important moment. And Shyamalan keeps refusing to give it to you. The effect, once you lean into it rather than resist it, is profound unease. It's the visual equivalent of the beach itself. The beach looks like a place that should follow normal rules. The camera looks like it should follow normal rules. Neither of them do. You're constantly slightly off balance, slightly denied the thing you're reaching for, and that sensation rhymes exactly with what the characters are experiencing. They're in a place that looks like a place they understand. It keeps not behaving like one. The handheld work adds to this. Long stretches of the film are shot with a camera that moves the way a person moves. Not swooping drone work, not locked-off tripod precision, but the small, breathing movement of something held in human hands. Combined with the off-angle framing, it gives the film a texture that's genuinely uneasy in ways you feel before you can name them. Your brain knows the grammar of movies. Old keeps speaking the grammar slightly wrong, on purpose, and your brain registers the wrongness without always being able to identify the source. Some audiences find this annoying. I think it's one of the most committed things about the film, and also one of the least credited. Where it came from. The graphic novel Sandcastle by Pierre Oscar Levy and Frederick Peters came out in 2010, and if you've seen Old and haven't read it, the comparison is worth your time. The core premise is the same, a beach that ages you rapidly, a group of people trapped there, the horror of watching time accelerate through bodies that have no capacity to slow it down. But the tone and the texture of the two things are different in ways that illuminate what Shyamalan chose to keep and what he chose to change. The graphic novel is quieter, in the way European graphic novels often are, more interior, more focused on the existential weight of the experience than the thriller mechanics of solving it. It sits with the horror more than it moves through it. The visual language of Peters' artwork is spare and precise, the expressions on the characters' faces doing enormous amounts of work. Shyamalan moved the story toward plot, toward the pharmaceutical conspiracy, toward the twist, toward the mechanics of escape. He gave the characters more defined backstories, more drama in their relationships, more genre architecture to hang everything on. Whether this is an improvement depends entirely on what you want from it. If you want the slow existential dread of watching people simply age in front of you, the graphic novel is more purely that. If you want a thriller with emotional weight, the film is doing more. What Shyamalan took from the source and carried intact is the fundamental image, the body as a clock, time as a predator, beauty as a container for terrible things. Those are Levy and Peters' ideas. The beach is theirs. The rest is a collaboration between their premise and Shyamalan's instincts, and the seams between those two things are occasionally visible, but the combination produces something neither would have made alone. What each character actually represents? Here's the thing nobody talks about enough with Old. The group on that beach isn't random, not just because the pharmaceutical company selected them, but because Shyamalan selected them, and the selection is doing symbolic work. Guy is an actuary. His job is the measurement of risk, calculating the probability and cost of future events, putting numbers on uncertainty, telling insurance companies how to price the unknown. He represents the human attempt to manage time, to contain it within models and projections and carefully calculated margins. The beach destroys this completely. Every model he knows becomes useless. Every calculation runs at the wrong speed. The actuary who spent his career outwitting time gets dropped into a place where time cannot be outwitted, and the film watches him adapt, not by abandoning reason, but by turning it toward the only problem that matters. He doesn't stop calculating, he just calculates differently. Priska is a museum curator. Her entire professional identity is built around preservation. Keeping things from changing, stopping decay, maintaining the integrity of objects against the erosion of time. She exists in opposition to what the beach does, and the film loads her with an ovarian tumor, a disease growing inside her, change happening within her body that she cannot curate, cannot preserve against. She arrives on the beach already losing the fight she's built her life around. The surgery on the sand, where the thing growing inside her is removed in the worst possible circumstances by a man who is himself falling apart, is the film's most literalized metaphor. Priska, the curator, having something extracted from her against her will, in a place designed to make everything change faster. Charles is authority and expertise meeting the one situation where authority and expertise mean nothing. The cardiac surgeon, the man who fixes hearts, who holds people's most vital organ in competent hands, has a mind that is betraying him. His schizophrenia is the internal version of what the beach does externally. He can't trust his own perception. His expertise requires a stable relationship with reality, and reality keeps shifting underneath him. He's the film's most tragic figure, actually, if you track him carefully. A man who was good at his job, who genuinely had skills that matter, destroyed not by the beach's time acceleration, but by the failure of the one tool he needed most, his brain. Patricia is a therapist. She holds other people's emotional realities together for a living. She arrives on the beach with epilepsy, a condition that causes her own brain to malfunction without warning. The therapist who stabilizes others cannot stabilize herself. She spends the film being steadying and warm and present right up until her body refuses to cooperate anymore, and the gap between her professional competence and her physical vulnerability is a specific kind of sad that the film earns rather than manufactures. Jaren, the nurse, is the quiet one in this symbolic lineup. Nurses operate in the margins of medicine, doing the actual continuous care, the maintenance, the presence. He's the most practically useful person on the beach because his instincts are about ongoing management rather than dramatic intervention. He's also the one who takes the active risk, who swims for help, who goes into the water with a plan. The nurse who spent his career doing the sustained, unglamorous work of keeping people going is the one who goes farthest toward getting everyone out. He just doesn't make it back. Trent, 6 years old and carrying the solution in his pocket without knowing it, is the film's argument that children pay attention in ways adults have stopped paying attention. He remembered what Idlib said not because he was trying to remember it, but because he was present for it the way kids are present, without filters, without categorizing information as relevant or irrelevant. The adult version of Trent would have half listened to a kid at a resort and moved on. The 6-year-old version stored it whole. His youth is literally the thing that saves everyone, not despite being a child, but because of it. The real-world echo. The pharmaceutical conspiracy at the heart of Old isn't purely science fiction. Clinical drug trials are a real, complex, ethically fraught process, and the history of pharmaceutical testing has a genuinely dark chapter involving consent, exploitation, and the use of vulnerable populations as test subjects without their knowledge or full understanding. The Tuskegee syphilis study, thalidomide trials, the ongoing debates about how drug trials are conducted in developing countries where oversight is weaker and populations are more economically vulnerable. Shyamalan doesn't make Old as a polemic about any of this. He's not making a documentary, he's making a thriller. But the villain he chose, not a supernatural force, not a monster, not a random act of nature, but a corporation running unauthorized trials on unwitting vacationers, resonates because it rhymes with things that have actually happened. The beach is fantastical. The motivation behind it is recognizable. What makes this choice land better than a lot of corporate villain thriller plotting is how mundane the manager is. He's not a mad scientist, he's not ideologically driven, he's a middle manager of atrocities, a man who executes a process that was designed above his level and doesn't appear to have lost much sleep over the human cost of it. The banality is the point. The really scary thing isn't the beach. It's the guy who sent the minivan. Why the film divides people old has a split audience, and the split is almost perfectly predictable once you understand what kind of movie it's trying to be. People who wanted a pure horror film were frustrated by the clinical, almost procedural way Shyamalan handles the horror. He's not trying to make you jump. He's not building toward a scare, he's building toward a feeling, dread that grows slowly, existential discomfort that doesn't release. That's a legitimate mode of horror filmmaking, but it's not what a significant portion of the audience came for, and the mismatch produces the reaction of watching something that feels like it's not quite delivering. People who wanted a pure drama were frustrated by the thriller mechanics, the twist, the conspiracy, the escape. The pharmaceutical reveal takes the film out of pure existential territory and into genre plotting, and some viewers feel that this is the film chickening out of the harder, quieter thing it was building toward. The people who seem to respond most positively are the ones who can hold both things at once: thriller architecture and genuine emotional weight. The people who can watch a baby die on a beach and also find the corporate conspiracy satisfying. That's not a huge audience segment, but they exist, and they tend to feel very strongly about this film. There's also the dialogue problem, which is real and worth acknowledging directly. Shyamalan writes characters who explain themselves, not in an expository way exactly, but in a way that removes ambiguity. That ambiguity would have served better. Characters announce their feelings, they state their realizations. They make sure you understand what's happening emotionally, rather than trusting the performance and the situation to carry it. For a film this committed to showing, rather than telling in its visual language, the screenplay's tendency to tell is a genuine tension. It doesn't ruin the film, but it keeps it from being as great as its best sequences suggest it could be. Where this sits in Shyamalan's career. Shyamalan's career arc is one of the more fascinating stories in contemporary Hollywood, and Old sits in an interesting position within it. The early run, The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs, established him as someone with a genuine gift for atmosphere and emotional restraint, for building dread without cheap tricks, for endings that recontextualize everything that came before them. The Village and Lady in the Water started the critical slide. The Happening became a shorthand for a certain kind of unintentional comedy. For about a decade, his name on a poster was a punchline. Then Split happened in 2016, and the conversation shifted again. James McAvoy, Kevin Wendell Crumb, a performance so committed and technically extraordinary that it reminded everyone what Shyamalan could do when the material aligned with his instincts. Split worked because the central performance gave his atmospheric something genuinely compelling to wrap around. Old is Shyamalan working without a McAvoy, without a single towering performance to anchor everything. The ensemble is strong but distributed, and the film relies on premise rather than performance as its central engine. What it demonstrates is that his instincts as a visual filmmaker and a builder of sustained dread are still completely intact. The dialogue problems were always there. The camera instincts are still extraordinary. Old is a film by a director who knows exactly what he's doing with a lens and is still occasionally uncertain about what to do with a line reading. That tension has defined his entire career. When the writing rises to meet the directing, you get Unbreakable. When it doesn't, you get The Happening. Old lands somewhere in between, closer to the former than the latter, better than its reputation, not quite as good as its best moments suggest. The ending's real architecture. The final scene, the aunt opening the door to two adults, is where the film's emotional argument lands completely. Think about what that scene is actually about. The aunt has a version of Trent and Maddox in her head. She's been carrying that version since she last saw them. Kids. Her sister's kids. The people she loves occupy a fixed image in memory regardless of what time does to the actual living people. She opens the door and reality disagrees with her memory and she has to choose, in real time in front of them, which one to honor. She chooses the real people. She reaches for them anyway. This is the film's answer to everything it has been asking. Not a cure for aging, not a way to stop time or reverse it or even slow it down. Just the willingness to keep reaching for the people in front of you regardless of whether they match the version you've been carrying. The aunt doesn't know these adults the way she knew those children, but she knows they're hers. That's it. That's the whole argument. 17,000 words and a beach full of horror, and it lands on the simplest possible thing: reach for the people you love, even when they've changed. Especially when they've changed. What the film gets right that nobody talks about the kids. Specifically, the casting decision to use multiple actors for each child character as they age. Nolan River then, Luca Rodriguez, then Alex Wolff for Trent, Alexis Swinton, then Thomasin McKenzie for Maddox, and the extraordinary care taken in making those transitions feel continuous. Watch Alexis Swinton play young Maddox in the first 30 minutes of the film. The watchfulness, the way she holds herself slightly apart from situations, observing. The restraint. Then watch Thomasin McKenzie pick up exactly that quality and carry it through the next hour. She didn't study the script. She studied the younger actress's performance, and she carries it faithfully into a body 5 years older, and the continuity of character across that physical jump is seamless in a way that deserves far more attention than it gets. Alex Wolff does the same thing with Trent, keeping the verbal habit, the relentless engagement, the openness, and adds to it the particular quality of a kid who has been watching terrible things all day and is still trying to find a way through rather than a way out. His Trent is Trent at 11, just more tired and more determined. This is craft. Unglamorous, technical, invisible craft, the kind that shows up on screen as a feeling rather than an obvious achievement, and nobody on this film gets enough credit for it. The honest final word Old is a film about something real. Not pharmaceuticals, not beaches, not accelerated aging, but the thing underneath all of those. The genuine terror of time passing. The way you can look at a photograph from 10 years ago and barely recognize the person in it. The way you understand intellectually that you are aging every second and cannot feel it happening, cannot catch the moment of change, can only see the accumulation in retrospect. The beach makes visible something that is always happening invisibly. That's the movie. That's what it's for. It doesn't execute that perfectly. The dialogue gets in the way sometimes. The pacing tests your patience in the middle section. The ending wraps up the conspiracy a little too cleanly for a film that spent its first 100 minutes refusing to be clean about anything. These are real criticisms that land, but the images stay. Kara sitting with her baby. Charles performing surgery on the sand with failing sanity and undiminished skill. Trent reading that notebook. Maddox lying back on the ground outside the cove, looking at stars that are finally just stars again, not a ceiling over a trap. Priska's hands on the coral in the dark, finding the gap. These images stay because they're the truth underneath the genre mechanics. Bodies that change. Time that doesn't wait. Love that reaches anyway. Watch it again sometime. Slower this time. Less focused on the plot. More focused on the faces. Watch what the camera does when you're not watching it. Watch the light shift across that cove from morning to night. You'll find things you missed the first time. There's always something you missed the first time.